Welcome to What's Your Point with Colin Barnes and Graham Mills. In this series of podcasts, we will use a famous statement or quote from the world of sport to start our conversation and bring light to a topic. Our goal is to dispel myths and make the truth stick. Come join us in the discussion. Today is our first podcast in a series where we will be tackling the argument of winning versus development. Our quote to start us off is a famous one from sport, especially in America. There are some misconceptions around this quote, as the original American football coach to deliver this line was Red Sanders of the UCLA Bruins. But Hall of Fame coach of the Green Bay Packers, Vince Lombardi, is the one we publicly credit. Here's the quote: "Winning isn't everything. It's the only thing." Hey Graham, how are we doing?
Good, thank you.
All right. We've finally done it. We're going after the abominable snowman. We're going after Bigfoot. We're going after the Yeti, using a Yeti. Okay. We are going after winning versus development. And I don't think one conversation is going to be good enough, or it's going to be short enough, long enough to be able to handle all this. So this is going to get broken up into a bunch of chunks. So are you ready for winning versus development?
Yeah, it's a good job. We've had a couple of weeks off from the podcast, so re-energized and ready to tackle it.
Yeah. So perfect quote to start it with, the old Vince Lombardi: "Winning isn't everything. It's the only thing." I obviously, as you've alluded to, in the differences between our cultures, that is a philosophy that we kind of grew up with. And for people who don't know who Vince Lombardi is, he is the American football coach for the Packers during what they called the Ice Bowl, where people's hands were basically going into permafrost because it was so cold during the game. And his team, the Packers, were able to win the game in the very first Super Bowl. So kind of an important part of that kind of leads into, it's just about winning. And we hear this as a youth coach. I know this is a hot topic, not just for you as a coach and your coaching circles. It bleeds into the players, it bleeds into the parents. And we've got the structure, so we've got a whole host of perspectives. So coming off the pitch today, how's your winning versus development conversation coming along?
Yeah, I think it's a philosophical stance, really. A lot of people tend to position themselves at sort of one end of the continuum, so at polar opposites. So some people believe in youth football is all around development and it's the taking part and the lessons that you learn from that. And then others tend to believe that competing and aiming or striving to win is what defines us as sports people and people that want to progress in the game. So I don't necessarily think they're mutually exclusive. I think you can have both. And that may sound like I'm sitting on the fence a little bit, but I think you can, if you've got the desire to win and the desire to compete. We're all sports people. We all take part in sport because of that competitive element, and we all accept that when we sign up to sport, that some days we're going to lose and some days we're going to win. But in youth development, if we're just always focusing on the outcome, which we can't control, we might be able to influence it, but we can't control it 100%. We need to be focusing on the performance. And if we do the things right, we carry out our philosophy, we adhere to our principles and what the game should look like, then hopefully if we do that well, it increases our chances of winning. So there's, I guess, the whole debate, performance or winning versus development, came about relatively recently in my experience as a coach. Because if I look back to when I started playing football at under 7s, under 8s, believe it or not, we used to play on a full-size men's pitch with full-size men's goals. And you look back on it now and you think, what are we doing? But that was what football was like back then. There wasn't the youth review. that came in from the FA, I think around about 2012, where they changed the formats of the game. So 5v5, 7v7, 9v9, 11v11, size 3 balls, size 4 balls, 3/4 goals, mini goals, all those sorts of things to make the game more relevant and realistic to your age and stage of development. And I guess with that came this conversation around winning and development, because they almost got rid of leagues. And my experiences was it wasn't the players that couldn't be trusted with leagues, it was the adults. So the coaches and the parents that made the leagues an issue, and it all became about winning. And we all know those grassroots coaches that stand on the sideline and shout, and the parents on the other side of the pitch, which are coaching their children to play. I think if we just left it to the players, that winning versus development thing wouldn't be an issue. I think it's us as adults that have, and I think you're going to come on to sort of the ego versus task focus.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it's us as adults that have made that a conversation.
Well, we spent last week in all this preparation. We started showing each other video clips that kind of brought about our recollections. And lo and behold, I show a FA clip to you, and you weren't aware of it at the time. And it's like the little kids from the FA during, I guess that must have been that change for the smaller playing size and the formats, went out to St. George's, put adults into a pitch that was, proportionally the same size that little kids. So the goal was, 10 feet tall, and 15 feet wide. The corners couldn't get swung in. And obviously in the Midlands, it's a little bit windy. And so corners could not get into the box, into the area. Obviously old, retiree kind of us going out, and probably not the fittest, and it burned them out. It took a long time. And then you showed me the Kez video, and this idea of, and I think it leads to your point, the adults taking charge, and this constructionism of what should be going on comes from the adults. If I think back as well, I remember playing 3 or 4 side at like 5 or 6. And then, being basically an Englishman in, rural Alabama in the early 80s or mid 80s, I was well ahead of that area. And so I became the Happy Gilmore of the area, meaning I set records. I didn't take off my skate and try and stab somebody with it, but I think I played in 5, state championships as at the U12 level. So that means I was playing 11 aside as a 6-year-old and as a 7-year-old, and never knew anything different. Like, that's just what it was. And we just grew up, and if you didn't make it, then it's on you. That idea of, it was just winning, just figure out a way and get it done. Mm-hmm. So it's funny that you say you didn't know about it until, or didn't come about till later. We were talking about it, I guess, in America. We went, the academy system was only 9s to 12s. And that came out in, I think I moved to Georgia in 2004. So I think they were under their first or second year, where they go, all right, we've had enough of these leagues. We need to stop having promotion and relegation at the 9s, 10s, and 11s, and 12s. So basically we're talking about the foundation phase. We need to stop having winning at all cost at that age. And we're just going to have a bunch of friendlies, schedule who you like kind of thing. And that was my first, real, real job as an academy director. And so that's when it kind of started for us. And that conversation needed to be had, because we had to convince a bunch of American parents, yeah. we're going to go do this tournament and it's about winning then, but during the friendlies, it's not about winning, it's about development. So that's when I remember having those conversations as early as those years.
Yeah.
When did you have your first conversation with the parents or a group of parents and say, all right, it's not about this, it's about this, meaning in that winning versus development ideology?
I would probably say it would have been when I was the youth development phase lead at Bournemouth. So at the start of every season, you would have an induction for parents and players and discuss what the season's going to look like and expectations, all those sorts of things. And explaining to the parents that, there'll be some games that we will treat as competitive games, and we will inform them when those are. And other games would be for development, so that it would be on working on their learning objectives and trying to change the lens on what success looks like. So it's not the outcome. It could be the topic that we're working on for that period of time. If we're demonstrating success in that might be a win for us, regardless of the result. Those were the sorts of conversations that I was having probably around, I would say 2014, I guess, around about that time. But yeah, I think the English academy system is one of the only high performance pathways in football that I know of in Europe that don't have leagues. All of the countries that I've visited and gone to their academies, they all have leagues. And in some cases they're online and players and parents can log in and see how their teams are performing and stuff. But we've gone completely the other way, where it's every game is about development, and there might be a couple of games within your calendar where there's a Premier League tournament and it's win, loss, knockout, all those sorts of things. But generally speaking, an academy now is a very development focused environment, which on one hand is really, really good. But I worry about that sort of taming versus training aspect of these players that are coming from grassroots backgrounds and have got some good attributes and good things that they do. And then they come from playing in a grassroots league to then come in an academy where I don't think it's explicitly said to them, but it's almost like, winning doesn't matter and it's not about the results. And, we don't care about the scoreline. If you're coming from an environment or an experience where you're used to being in a league to then being in one which doesn't seem to value competition, I guess that can be quite tough. And I don't know if that's the right message. And I think you've explained to me before, it shouldn't be winning versus development. It should be competition versus learning. Because we can compete and learn at the same time. So it's not a versus argument. And I think that's where we're starting out with this conversation. Should we be trading one off against the other? So if we lose 8-0 but learn loads, is that a problem? And if we win 8-0 and win and learn nothing because the opposition are too easy or because whatever, is that a problem?
The other quote we could have used, I don't know if this is translated across here. I learned more in defeat than I do in a win. And it's like, top 5 things losers say. I mean, this is so big and encompassing, where we're this kind of conversation is going to go through a bunch of different paths. This first part is about the opposition, meaning if we visually see the word winning and the word development, they are, knuckling up, going against each other. Our first reaction, every time I bring this up in front of, my mates back across, whether it's coach educators, whether it's, lecturers here that are in different sport, they the same thing that you said. Well, it's not a dichotomy. It's you don't have one or the other. It's kind of blended. And so we we have this, the way you would now visualize, instead of two arrows kind of going at each other, in this case, two knuckles for a fight, you actually have a line that goes from one to the other, and you link them, and they're actually moving closer together, meaning one is helping the other. And it sounds great. In fact, I have had the conversation where when I do this, I eventually got to a point where I figured out if I said it's about development, it's not about winning, I pissed off a whole lot of parents, because especially in America, you know what? It is about winning. It is about being successful. We have, I'm assuming similarly, there's plenty of places you can go and play with or play for. Most people want to be highly competitive and be around the best players. We've already said that the elite environment, people should be in the best training environment with the best coaches, playing against the best teams. Well, if your team's not winning, that's the easiest measure to know, are you good at something? And so whenever you start off that conversation, it's not about winning, it's about development. You've now alienated, even though you might have the right philosophy, it still doesn't come across. So then I had the conversations, okay, well, actually winning and development are merged together. They're actually helping each other, because you can't do one without the other. You can't just focus in on development and forget about winning. They actually need to be going inside. In fact, winning is the byproduct of doing the right things. Yeah. And that's where it comes into this, this idea of process or process versus product. And you alluded to earlier, the task and the ego, we actually do separate these things, whether we know it or not. So literature does it. So academic research and things like that, our own conceptualization, we know process versus product. We know that, okay, here's an end result. Here's, we're actually trying to improve in a certain specific areas. And so when someone actually comes out and says, no, they should be together, they're separate, it sounds like you're full of it, if you know what I mean. You've lost credibility when you say, well, actually, they're kind of together. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, I think the problem is that we as humans, we like comparisons or correlations, and we understand that. So, Messi versus Ronaldo, it's always the debate, one or the other. It can't be both, because they're both very good and they're very good at what they do. It's always, social media, Sky Sports News, it's always the debate, which one or the other. So I think we as humans, we can relate to that. We understand that, that trade-off or comparison of always measuring something against something else or correlating things. So this happens because of this. So I think we as humans, we like that, and we feel comfortable in that area and that space. Whereas the idea of, well, it might not be either one, it might be both. That seems a bit sort of grey and complex and messy.
Yeah.
And I don't think we like that. So I think that's the issue. But ultimately, it is both. And I think the American model is interesting because, generally speaking, it's a pay-to-play model. Whereas the EPP and the academy system is, you don't pay for it. The club pay for the resources and the facilities that you have access to. So I guess it's an easier pill to swallow if you're a parent who's getting provided all these things and not having to pay for it.
Yeah.
If each week your son is losing games and stuff. Whereas in America, if they're paying a significant amount of money for their son or daughter to go to a camp or to a club, they might start to ask questions if success isn't clearly visible, short-term wins. So I guess that's an issue. In terms of my own development, I think I probably have learned more through failure than I have success. But I think that's because the type of person I am, and I think it depends on the type of person you are. To say that everyone needs failure to learn, I think it depends on, because I'm quite reflective. So when I win, I don't necessarily need to reflect. We've just won and everything's good. And when I lose, I want to know why I've lost, and I really want to understand what I could have done better and how I could have done this or that. So I probably am more introspective and look inside myself and want to question myself when I lose. Now, that's just the way I am, but not everyone's like that. So when I have been unsuccessful or failed at things, I tend to have learnt more from those experiences, and they're difficult and uncomfortable, and I don't like it because as a sports person, I want to win. But, it's forced me to reflect on them.
All right. Social media time. It's coming in. Would you rather win ugly or lose with really attractively, where you developed and learned a whole lot through your losing?
Now, because I've only ever worked, well, that's a lie. I have worked in performance previously, post 16s, 19s, that sort of age, where winning was important. But most of my career as a coach has been in youth development. So my own bias here, whether that's because of my experiences or because of who I am, would be on I would rather lose by playing my philosophy in the way that I see the game and what is it's like values. We've talked about values in the unit before. I value certain things in a performance, and if we achieve that but we lose, I can walk away quite comfortable as the coach that they've brought to life what I've wanted them to do. They've demonstrated, they've been a product of my coaching and my influence on the group. So I'm quite happy with losing if we lose in the right way and it's the right performance. Again, that might sound very soft to you, but if I was in a performance environment, we're in a league table where we need to win points and win games, then obviously I probably wouldn't be saying that. I'd probably be saying that, we'll take a 1-0 win. Tottenham last night against Man City, you look at the stats and Man City obliterated the stats, but yet Tottenham win the game 2-0. Now, Mourinho won't be going home and thinking, that was really disappointing, we didn't play particularly well. He'll be going home thinking 3 points, we're top of the league. So it depends on the environment you're working in, and I suppose your own value system and what you deem to be important. But for me, at this moment in time, I would value performance over end result.
And this, one, thank you for sharing in front of the whole public. That is a hard thing to admit amongst your peers, that is your genuine belief. But it leads into what we've been talking about with task and ego. So achievement goal theory kind of came from a variety of people, with Ames in 92, Dweck and Leggett in 88, Nichols 84, 89. And so there's these two opposing kind of individual philosophies, the task and the ego. The task means you are more worried about the skill mastery, the development in this case, versus the ego, where you are only trying to compare your results against others. And so this works really well into, usually the analogy is on a golfer. So you're playing golf. You're like me, you're miserable. You might hit bogey golf and you're happy with a 90 when you go out and play every now and again. Actually, right now, but 90 would be really nice. But if I hit an 88, for me, I'm happy. I got a little bit better. I improved on the skills I was supposed to. But if I go out and play against Tiger Woods, anyone that is competent at playing and plays regularly, and they shoot an 80, well, then I'm a loser. And so that's the ego. So we compare ourselves in a variety of ways. So one, we compare ourselves against ourselves, and that would be more task oriented. Then we compare ourselves against others in the immediate area. And then we compare ourselves against the standard. And we see that in the school systems, whether it's, some of our standardized testing. Anytime that you've been placed, I was placed in the 95th percentile. That's not just against your peers, that's against the standard of all, not just who you did. Well, I was first in my class. Well, that doesn't mean your class was really high. That just means you were first out of that group, which is again that ego. And then it's, well, I got an A, and some universities go a little bit different. Law school has everyone could get an A, could get a 95 in their actual assessments, and yet be bottom of the class, depending on if everyone got really high marks. And it kind of creates what then is this motivational climate. And we do it as coaches. So if we think back to our task, we're going to work on dribbling. Everyone's done a gates game of some sort, where you dribble through, you have a whole bunch of gates in an area. You've got 30 seconds, dribble through the gates as fast as you can with your right foot or dominant foot. And they do it. Okay, now I want you to try and beat your score. That would be the task. That would be try and beat your own attempts. Or we do it the same exact thing, and it's who got the most. Okay, good, great. Now, I've been coaching this age group for many years. This is my age group, just like you. You're in the YDP. You've had this age group at Saints for a few years now. You know what the expectation of players that have gone on and done this. If you can get to this level, then you will become a pro. And that's what everyone's achieving. And there goes into that ego. And so this is really important. And a study that was done, and I bring back just because it's University of Alabama, one of my predecessors at the program doing his PhD in dissertation, took a look at third graders, and he taught in different motivational climates. So he took a bunch of third graders, 3 separate classes. He did one where he just went task, and he said, I only want you to beat your own score. Keep trying to improve on yourself. He took another group and just did ego and just said, we're always going to compete against somebody else. And then he taught normally. And what they found out was it bumped whatever climate you set, those students increased in those orientations, meaning if you were teaching in task, that person, those kids became more task oriented. They valued it. But the odd part is it didn't lower the ego. It stayed the same. It didn't affect ego. One didn't go up and one didn't go down. One just went up, whatever you were doing. And the same for the ego, if you were teaching in that. And so what we take away from that is that what the climates that we set, how we do it, is going to increase those players' orientation or what they value. So you're talking about these value systems. Well, you might have grown up, if you look back into how you were developed and things that you did, you might have valued the really task-oriented activities that you did in your, primal years for learning. And that's what you latched onto, and that's what's carried and become a belief for you. While other people might have said, you know what, it's only about the winning, it's about the ego. And because of that, I'm not good unless I win, unless I'm beating someone else. And that becomes problematic for someone like me. I don't work out as much as I did when I played. I find it hard to compete against others when I don't have others to compete against now as a adult later in life, which we'll get to with the long-term athlete development model. Yeah. So there's that separation of the two, and obviously the suggestions are going to be you need a little bit of both. I think that's where that merging comes in.
I think we've referenced this in previous podcast about the pendulum coach that swings from one thing to another. So I guess going back to the FA Youth Review, we were concerned about the competitive focus in grassroots football and academies football. And so leagues were taken out. There's games now which are parent free and respect lines, and there's some really, really good stuff around that. But it's gone from one environment which was heavily competitive and heavily focused on the result to then almost stripping all of that out, and now it's all about taking part and
participation trophy. Yeah. Come on,
everyone gets a trophy when they go along to things, or a certificate of completion. Which in my day, if you got a trophy, it was because you earned something. Nowadays, it's because you do a holiday camp, or everyone gets rewarded. And maybe that is just society now. I don't know, but I think that pendulum effect of going from one extreme to another, you're always going to have some issues because of the sheer contrast between the two. Whereas, if you're somewhere in the middle, you're probably going to get some of the good bits from each. Yeah, there might be some trade-off, but you're not going to be going from one extreme to another all the time. And that's certainly what I feel happened here in England. We went from winning to now it's all about development. And even when I see some coaches now in academy games, when the games program is development, you don't have to submit your score to anything. There's no league table. There isn't a conversation afterwards that why did you lose and that sort of thing. It's just it's all about development. So when the Premier League introduce a Premier League tournament, so one weekend of the year there might be a tournament, you all go to a central venue and play. The change in behaviour is it's because if you're always working in development and then all of a sudden someone goes, right, he's winning and he's competing, the change is vast in the behaviour of coaches on the sidelines. And I think we've now just become really unaccustomed to what that feels like because of this pendulum effect that we're seeing.
Thanks for joining the conversation. If any of this has sparked an interest in you, check out our resources in the description below to go and find out about the sources and links to learn more on your own. Here's how you can add to the discussion. First, you can agree or disagree on our position by commenting below. You can engage with others who have stated their stance. And finally, if you have a quote or a topic area that you'd like to suggest to us, please leave us with that information because your opinion matters. May the myths be dispelled and the truth stick.